Hello and welcome to Principles of Microeconomics, whichever one we're in. I am your host, Dr. B. Uh, Today we're going to be talking about efficient markets, and I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of comments about this week. We are in week 5, which means we are in chapter 7, and we're going to talk about efficient markets. Uh, with this week, we have a Chapter 7 quiz, about 5 questions, um, true, false, multiple choice, just as they have been in the past. A couple of math questions here. It's not too bad. It's mostly a mixture of the true, false, multiple. In fact, there's really only one math question involved here, and it has to deal with concept on efficiency. It's, with respect to producer surplus. And so that'll be your assignment that's due on Sunday night is a Chapter 7 quiz. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into the discussion on consumers, producers, and efficiencies for the marketplace. So surpluses. We've talked briefly about surpluses recently when we talked about the concept of supply and demand. We know that we have a surplus when the supply is greater than the demand. If we think about what we learned about last week, when we talked about supply and demand concepts, we know that the surplus happens when the demand is greater than supply. That's at the point above equilibrium. And we can measure the surplus. So that's producer surplus when the supply is greater than demand. We also have consumer surplus, typically when demand is greater than supply, and we'll talk about this as well. And there's a point of equilibrium, which is equivalent to optimization. And so we're going to talk about these concepts. One of the first things we talked about in this course is about scarcity of resources. Scarcity of resources. We know that resources are inherently scarce, meaning there's not enough resources to go around. And so what we do is we allocate resources for efficiency purposes, meaning we take resources and allocate them where they're needed to optimize production, to optimize consumption, to create an efficient marketplace. This is how we allocate resources. The allocation of resources depends on the producers and the consumers. And we allocate resources, again, where they're needed to optimize levels of production within the society. The allocation of these resources that have an impact on the well-being of individuals is called welfare economics. We call it welfare economics because it has to relate with the well-being of the individuals, consumers and producers, within the economy. And so because of the scarcity of resources and the need to allocate resources to optimize production and consumption, we go through a process of identifying the limitations of production and consumption. Consumption, from the consumer's perspective, the buyer's perspective, one of the limitations, outer limits, is the willingness to pay. Individuals have different ability or willingness to pay for certain goods. A buyer's willingness to pay for a certain good is based on the maximum amount they're willing to pay for that good. A lot of the willingness to pay for something is based on how much the buyer values that good. For example, I value certain electronics at a higher price than others would. I'm willing and able to pay more for a computer than I would a vacation. Okay? That is my willingness to pay, is the amount that I'm willing to pay for the computer. Willingness to pay. It's based on how much I value that computer. In this example, we have 4 individuals who are willing and able to buy an iPod. Okay? And their willingness to pay is different. Everyone has a different willingness to pay for something. So we have 4 individuals with 4 different willingness to pay. We got Anthony willing to pay $250 for an iPod. Chad's willing to pay $175 for an iPod. Leah is willing to pay $300 for an iPod. And John is willing to pay $125 for an iPod. So again, the willingness to pay is based off of the maximum amount that they are willing to pay for the good. And it's also based on how much they value that good, how much they value this iPod that they want to buy. In this example, if the iPod is priced at $200, who's going to buy it? And what will be the quantity demanded? The quantity demanded is based on who's willing to pay for it. Okay? The quantity demanded is based on who's willing to pay for it. In this example, I only have 2 individuals that are willing to pay for it. Anthony and Flea are willing to pay for this at $200 sale price. Chad and John are not willing to pay $200 for this iPod. So, since I only have 2 individuals, Anthony and Flea, that are willing to pay the $200 for this iPod, my quantity demand is 2, because only the 2 of them are willing to pay. So again, the quantity demanded is based on the number of individuals willing to pay. Now we can create this thing called the demand schedule. The demand schedule tells us the quantity demanded based on a range of price. Quantity demand based on the range of price. That's the demand schedule. So we can see based off of this demand schedule who's willing to buy it, which derives the quantity demanded. So we can see that if the price of the iPod was $125, all four individuals would be willing to buy it. If the price was set at 126 to 175, three individuals would be willing to buy it. If the price was set at 176 and 250, two individuals. 251 to 300, one. 300 is nobody. But this is what we call the demand schedule. It's derived based on the number of individuals willing to buy at particular prices. That's how we create demand schedule. And with that demand schedule, I can create the demand curve for the willingness to pay. I simply take the range of price and the quantity. Range of price and the quantity. We can see that from 301 and up, it's zero. The quantity is zero. 300 down to 251, we can see that one person is unable to pay. 250 down to 176, two individuals. 175 to 126, three individuals. 125 to zero, four individuals. We see the demand curve, and we see that it's not quite a curve. It's more like a step curve. We talked briefly about step curves recently. I think it was last week, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been a week before. But we talked about this concept called step curves. It's where the demand curve is shaped like steps. And so the willingness to pay demand curve is more of a step curve. It's shaped like steps, like a staircase. So the demand curve shaped like steps. If the numbers were greater, of course it would be more smooth. Yeah? We're only talking about four individuals. If we were talking about 100 individuals, we know that the range of prices would be less. The range of prices would be less with more individuals. And therefore, they would look like either tiny steps or more like a smoother curve. Because we're only dealing with four individuals, yeah, the curve looks like staircase. But if it was a lot of individuals and smaller price ranges, it would more look like a smoother curve. And this nice graphic represents where the individuals have their willingness to pay. That's the flat part of the step. At the flat part of the step, call this the marginal buyer. Marginal buyer. It's the definition, yeah? Marginal buyer. It's a buyer who would leave the market if the price were any higher. Okay. So the flat part, for example, where John is here, John's willingness to pay is, we know, $125, yes. Once it goes above 125 to 126, which is on this vertical line here between John and Chad, John leaves the marketplace. He can't afford above the 126. Yeah. That's what that represents, marginal buyer. So now that you have a basic understanding of the willingness to pay, we can talk about this concept called surplus. We know that surplus means that we have more of it to go around, right? That's what surplus is. We got surplus. We have more than enough. Yeah, that's what surplus means. We know that a producer surplus, the quantity available, is above the point of equilibrium uh, in a marketplace, right? That's producer surplus. But we want to talk about this concept called a consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is when we have an amount of buyers that are willing to pay minus the amount the buyer actually pays. So a way to think about this is I'm able to buy the iPod at $250. That's how much I'm willing to pay. But if the iPod is only $200, my surplus of cash is $50. That's a way of thinking about it, right? So for Anthony, let's say for Anthony, the sale price for the iPod is only $200. He has $250 willing to spend. That means he'll have a consumer surplus of $50. The word surplus means you have more than enough, right? That's what surplus means. So if you have more than enough willingness to pay, minus the price that you actually pay, you have a surplus amount. So let's say we have a sale price of $260 for the iPod. Leah is willing to pay $300. So she's willing to pay $300 for the iPod. She only pays $260. That's the sale price. Therefore, she has a consumer surplus of $40. It's the sale price minus the price actually paid. So that's the willingness to pay minus the price actually paid. Willingness to pay minus the price actually paid. That's consumer surplus. So if Leah's she has willingness to pay $300, she only pays $260. That gives her a consumer surplus of $40. The consumer surplus of $40 is reflected beneath the first staircase. It's the one in the part there in green. That's consumer surplus on the graph. Let's say the sale price for the iPod was only $220. Leah still has willingness to pay of $300. So if she has $300 and she only pays $220, that gives her a consumer surplus of $80. Anthony can also has a willingness to pay above 220. So Anthony has a willingness to pay of $250. He pays $220 sale price, which means that Anthony has a consumer surplus of $30. The total consumer surplus, which is all of the individuals' consumer surplus added together, is $110. That's Flea's consumer surplus of 80 and Anthony's consumer surplus of 30. We add the two together to get total consumer surplus of 110. So to recap, the total consumer surplus represents all of the individuals' consumer surpluses added together. Okay. That's weird that that part is not showing it. I created a part of this that's not showing up. Okay. So let's say we have a demand for shoes. We all need shoes. Everyone needs shoes. That's how we walk around. We have a lot of buyers who need shoes. And we have a price of pair of shoes of range of $0 to $60 and a range of quantity demanded from 0 to thousands of pairs. So we draw the demand curve. As you know, the demand curve is always downward sloping and to the right. At a price of $50 per pair of shoes, oh, I'm sorry, I should say the 0 through 30 quantity at the bottom, that's represented in thousands and thousands. That's why you see the in parentheses, 1,000. Yeah. At a price of $50 per pair of shoes, I have a demand of 5,000 pairs of shoes. What that means is I have 5,000 individuals that are willing and able to pay, willingness to pay, $50 per pair of shoes. If the price decreases from $50 to $30 per pair of shoes, I will have 15,000 individuals demanding pairs of shoes at $30 per pair. With a $20 decrease in the pair of shoes, we will have a consumer surplus of $20. The consumer surplus is the original $50 minus the new price, $30. Gives us a consumer surplus of $20 per pair of shoes. So the consumer surplus area between the price and the demand curve from 0 to the new quantity 15,000 is represented up here. Now, you got to pull out your trigonometry hats, okay? The area of a triangle. This is another way of doing this, okay? Area of a triangle. An area of a triangle is equivalent to half, 0.5, times the base of the triangle times the height. The height, we can figure out this easy. 60 minus 30. The height is 30. The base is 15. 0 to 15, yeah? So the area of the triangle is half, 0.5, times 15, the base, times 30, the height. Gives us a consumer surplus total of $225. Everyone sees how we got there? Yes? You all good so far? Yes, yes, yes. You can still hear me. You haven't fallen asleep yet. Okay. Thank you, Maisha. Appreciate you. Okay. Now that we have a basic understanding of the consumer surplus, let me go away. Hold on a second. There it goes. We can see the effect on the changes of price. If the price were to increase from $30 a pair to $40 a pair, we would apply the same concept to understand the new consumer surplus. We would take the new base times the new height. So we take 0.5, which is half, times the new base, which is 10, times the new height, which is 20, to get a new consumer surplus of 100. One reason why there might be a decrease in consumer surplus is because buyers are leaving the market. Buyers leave the market for a couple of reasons. One is they don't need pairs of shoes. Okay, this is the market for shoes, yeah. Reason why they leave the market is they don't have a need for shoes at the moment. So they leave the shoe market. Or they no longer like shoes. They're going to wear something else, boots maybe. So they leave the marketplace. That's one reason why there would be a decrease in the consumer surplus. Another reason for the decrease in consumer surplus, of course, is the change in price. Remember, if you have a willingness to pay and the price goes up and you can no longer afford that, buy the shoes because your willingness to pay is 30, price goes up to 40, you will leave the market because you're not going to pay 40. So the fall in consumer surplus due to the increase in price. Okay. So with consumer surplus, when the price goes down, oftentimes there will be an increase in the consumer surplus. And that increase in the consumer surplus is usually a result of buyers entering the marketplace and existing buyers paying a lower price. So price goes down, expect consumer surplus to increase. That's the point that we're trying to make here. Okay. To find the consumer surplus graphically, again, we take what we call the area of the triangle. It's half times the base times the height. In this example, if the price is $30, giving a demand of 10,000, we can see graphically the base is 10. We can also see the height is also 10, $40 to $30. And 0.5 times 10 times 10 is 50. So the consumer surplus would be 50. If the price decreases to 20, the base gets much larger, so does the height. we can find the additional surplus by simply taking the new base times the height. And of course, just add in the additional units. This is one method. Okay. Another method is just simply take the new base times the height. So that's consumer surpluses. Now we need to talk about producer surpluses. Producer surpluses, as you know, is based on the number of producers willing and able to sell goods and services at particular prices at particular times. And we know, based off of previous discussions, that producer surpluses, based off of our previous lessons, are above the equilibrium on supply and demand. So, when we talk about producer surplus, we also talk about things like cost. Cost, as you know, is the value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. That's the cost. That's a cute definition, right? In accounting, we know that the cost is raw materials, direct labor, direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. Those are the costs of producing a product. The same is said in economics, of course. It's the cost of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. Direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. It's also the measure of the willingness to sell the product, right? I would only produce and sell a product as long as the price is greater than the cost. I'm not going to lose money, okay? If it costs me $10 to manufacture a calculator, I'm going to sell that calculator for larger than $10 sale price. Yeah, I'm going to try to make a profit. Heck, I might even try to sell for 20. You know? Gotta make some profit. Also gotta cover my costs. So, and I actually use this example a lot in accounting. Lawn cutting, lawn service. Lawn service, very popular business. Yeah, I got three individuals that cut lawns. I got Jack, Janet, and Chrissy. All these three individuals that cut lawns. It costs them, their total cost varies. Jack can get it done for $10 is his cost. Why is it only $10? Well, maybe he doesn't use the best lawn machine to cut the lawn. Maybe he's using cheaper gas, cheaper labor, and a cheaper machine. So his cost is only $10. Janet, she's in the middle of the road. She's got a nice machine, does a good job, decent gas, and she pays her employees a little bit better. So Janet's cost is $20 per lawn service. And Chrissy, she's got a really nice machine. One of the best I've ever seen, in fact. That's probably a John Deere, something fancy. And she uses premium gas, and she pays her employees really well. Okay, so her costs are $35 per service. So three different costs, three different individuals. Now remember, we're talking about cost. We're not talking about sales price. We're talking about cost. Sales price and cost are two very different things. Sales price, represents the price the buyers pay. The price the buyers pay. That's sales price. The cost is what it costs the sellers to produce the good or the service. That's the cost of mowing the lawn. It's not the price that the buyers pay for the lawn service. It's the cost to the lawn service companies that mow the lawn. Okay, here we go. So, first thing we do to figure out producer surplus is we create what's called a supply schedule. It's based on the cost information. It's very similar to the way that we do it for the consumer surplus. Yeah? So the producer surplus is based off of the ranges in price or cost in this case, and to derive the quantity supply. 0.9, it's 0 because that's below the cost of anyone. $10 to $19, that's 1, it's Jack. 20 to 34, it's 2, it's Jack and Janet. 35 and up, it's all 3 of them. And just as before, I can derive a supply curve. We know that supply curves are upward sloping and to the right. This supply curve also utilizes a step curve dynamic. And just as before, it's similar to the willingness to pay. It's based on the cost. At each quantity, the height of the supply curve is the cost of the marginal seller. Marginal seller, here's another definition. The marginal seller is the seller who would leave the market if the price were any lower. Okay, leave the market if the price were any lower. Chrissy would leave first if the price were below $35. She couldn't afford, to mow the lawn for anything less than $35. She would lose money. Yeah. Jack wouldn't be able to mow any lawn for less than $10. He would leave the market if the price goes below $10 because he can't afford to mow it for less than his cost. It's the same with Janet. Janet would leave the market if the price goes below $20 because her cost is $20. She cannot sell a lawn service for less than $20. She can't sell it for less than her cost. Chrissy cannot sell a lawn service for less than $35 because her total cost per lawn is $35. Now, very similar to consumer surplus, the producer surplus is the sales price minus the cost. Sales price minus the cost. Sales price minus the cost. Price received, or price received, sounds funny, right? It's the revenue received minus the willingness to sell. So, let's say that a lawn service is being proposed at a sales price per lawn service of $25. Okay, $25. we already know that Chrissy cannot mow the lawn. She can't do it because Chrissy's price cost. Chrissy's cost to mow the lawn is $35. She can't mow this lawn because they want it done for $25. However, both Jack and Janet have the ability to mow this lawn because their costs are lower than the sales price. Jack would benefit most from mowing this lawn for $25 because remember, his cost is only $10. So Jack's producer surplus will be $15. It's the sales price, $25, minus the cost. And Jack's cost is $10. So 25 minus 10 is 15. Janet would have a producer surplus of $5. Sales price, $25, minus the cost, $20. Chrissy can't do it. Her cost is too high. She can't mow it for $25 because she'd lose money. Right? So this gives us a total producer surplus $20. It's the total surplus of all producers. That's why I called it total producer surplus. Of course, when there's lots of sellers on the marketplace, more than three, we see that the supply curve is much smoother. And we can also use the example of the shoes. Suppose that a price per pair of shoes is $40. At that price, we can supply, the market can supply 25,000 pairs of shoes. Let's say if the sell price, or it costs the manufacturers $30 per pair of shoes at 15,000 pairs, then they would have a producer surplus of $10. The sell price, $40. The cost, $30, gives producer surplus of $10 at 15,000 pairs. So just as before, we can identify the producer surplus based on the area of the triangle. Base times a height. In this example, the base is 25. The height is let's see. Oh yeah, the height is 25. The base, hold on, let's see. Yeah, the base, I got all confused now. The base is 25. The height is also 25. The height of the triangle is the 40 minus the 15 is 25. So they're both 25, yes? So the area is half times a base times a height. That's the area of a triangle. So 0.5 times 25 base times 25 height gives us a producer surplus of $312.50. If the price goes down, sale price goes down from 40 to 30, this means at $30 per pair of shoes, we can produce 15,000 pairs. The new producer surplus would be 0.5 times a new base of 15 times a new height of 15 equals $112.50. Reasons why we have decreases in producer surplus. We have a few companies that have decided to leave the market. They're no longer selling shoes. And the other reason is at a change in a lower sale price, the producers are unwilling to sell at a lower price. Okay. Sometimes the price goes up. When the price goes up, it usually means that we're going to sell more. Okay, price goes up, we're going to sell more. Remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. We know that when the price goes up, so does the quantity supply. Remember, it's about trying to get that point of equilibrium, right? Price goes up, quantity goes up. Trying to meet that point to get to that point of equilibrium. Here we have an example. Let's say we have a marginal cost. So it cost us $20 to make one pair of shoes. We can make 10,000 pairs at that cost. I can find the producer surplus by taking half times the base times the height. In this example, the producer surplus would be 100. 0.5 times base of 10 times the $20 height. If the price increases to $30, my producer surplus additional units on additional units would be, again, half times, in this example, 5, and I'll explain why. It's 10 to 15, times a 10, 20 to 30, equals $25. Now you might be asking yourself, well, Dr. B, why does it say additional units? Well, think about this for a second. The producer surplus, when the price increases, we have a producer surplus on additional units sold. So to find the producer surplus on additional units sold, we simply take just the change into consideration, not the entire change, you see. We can add this in, so there, of course, will be an increase on the producer surplus, not just the additional units. On the initial 10, we just simply increase the height. Again, the goal is about market efficiency. We have consumer surpluses and producer surpluses. Well, what's it all mean? All these surpluses, you know. The concept here is to find efficiency in the marketplace. We have total surplus, which is all of your consumer surplus plus all of your producer surplus. As you recall, consumer surplus is the willingness to pay minus what they actually paid. Willingness to pay minus what they actually paid. That's consumer surplus. Producer surplus is the sales price minus the cost. Sales price minus the cost. That's producer surplus. The total surplus is the willingness to pay minus the cost to the sellers. Total surplus is willingness to pay minus the cost to the sellers. That's total surplus. Again, the idea here is we're trying to reach the point of equilibrium, if you will. We're looking at market efficiency. We need to allocate resources where they're needed in order to meet market efficiency. In a decentralized market economy like we have here in the United States, market efficiency or the allocation of resources is determined by the groups of buyers and sellers. Okay. That's how we figure out how to allocate resources. I have buyers that have their needs, sellers that have their needs. So that's how we figure out the allocation of resources. If there's a surplus in buyers and sellers, there's a surplus in the producers and the consumers. We can measure this by the society's well-being. These things together help us to determine whether we have an efficient market. We need to allocate our resources efficiently in order to maximize surplus. Goods are consumed by the buyers who value them most highly. Goods are produced by the sellers with the lowest cost, of course. And the change in quantity of a good will not increase the total surplus. There's that point we were talking about, the point of equilibrium. Again, this is what we try to strive for in economics, is the point of equilibrium. It's the balance between supply and demand. A market equilibrium is the balance between the consumers and the producers. And we can see in this example for the shoes, right? At $30 per pair of shoes, we can satisfy the demand of 15,000 pairs. That is my point of equilibrium, because that is where supply and demand meet. The consumer surplus is represented above the sale price, along the demand curve, at the point of equilibrium. And the consumer surplus, as you know, is measured by the area of the triangle. Half times base times height. In this example, half times 15 times 30 is our consumer surplus. Our producer surplus is below the sale price along the supply curve and at the point of equilibrium. The producer surplus can be measured by the area of the triangle. Half times base times height. And for the producer surplus, it's half times 15, which is the base, times 15, which is the height. The total surplus is the combination of consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, as you can already see, this triangle is not exactly even. So, in order to find this whole area, you do one at a time. Do consumer surplus first, and then producer surplus, and then you add the two together. Then you might be faced with a question. Is the market equilibrium efficient? And remember, efficiency depends on, I'm going to go back, efficiency depends on these three things. Goods consumed by the buyers who value them most highly. Goods produced by the producers valued at the lowest cost. Change in the quantity does not impact the increase in the surplus. As long as those things are true, the market will be efficient. Is the market equilibrium efficient? I would think yes, in this example. For buyers who have a willingness to pay greater than $30, they'll buy the shoes for $30. If the buyer has a willingness to pay that is less than the $30, they're not going to buy the shoes. Because remember, the willingness to pay drives their willingness to purchase at a particular price. So if the willingness to pay is greater than $30, they'll buy the shoes for $30. If their willingness to pay is less than $30, they're not going to pay $30 for the shoes. Buyers who value the good most are, of course, most likely to buy the shoes. If they really like the pair of shoes, it's a good price, $30, they're gonna buy it. That's what that tells us. For sellers, if their cost is less than $30, they will make the shoes. However, if their cost is greater than $30, they're not going to make the shoes. Again, the companies are not willing to produce the product if they're not going to make the product if they're going to lose money. Very straightforward. So those with the lowest cost, of course, will produce the shoes. As long as their cost of making the shoes is less than $30, much less than $30, they'll definitely make the shoes. Now let's take a look at the market efficiency for making these shoes. At a quantity of 20,000 pairs, the cost of producing the marginal unit is $35. So a price of $35 of making the shoes. But we also know that that's greater than the demand. The value to the consumers is only 20. This means if there's an increase at the total surplus, it would reduce the quantity. In other words, if I make 20,000 pairs of shoes, I'm only going to be able to sell those for 20 bucks because that's where the demand is. It'd be very difficult for me to sell them at 35. So anything greater than 15, it's going to be very difficult for me to sell. That tells me. The cost is $10. Oh, I'm sorry. The quantity of $10. I'm sorry. The quantity of 10,000. Cost of producing the shoes is $25. Value to the consumers is 40. You know I would do this all day long. Yes, I can increase my supply by 5, right? This is why the principles are the way that they are. Producers are willing to produce at lower costs. So, of course, they're going to produce the shoes at a lower cost. I'm not too big on quotes. Market efficiency. It's important that buyers and sellers take all of the available information into account before making decisions. It helps to guide the markets to be more efficient. In the United States, we have free markets for the most part, with the exception of a few like utility companies. It's the best way to organize market activity is through free markets because we allow the free market to dictate price and quantity. Supply and demand dictates market efficiency. It dictates where the resources are allocated. There's two primary assumptions that you need to know about how markets work. Most markets are competitive. They compete based on price. It's kind of like when you go down Canal Street in New York City and you see all the same shops selling all the same stuff. Each shop has a slightly different price for the same exact product. They do that to compete. The outcome, of course, is that it only matters to the buyers and the sellers in that market. So only the shops on that street does the price difference make a difference to. And of course, the customer shopping at those stores. If those assumptions are not accurate or that they're no longer true, that means market equilibrium is no longer efficient for that market. Sometimes things happen. And things happen that affect the markets, make them inefficient. This happens in certain situations Let me give you an example. Some time ago, um, T-Mobile ac- acquired Sprint, which they're both cell phone companies, as you probably are aware. T-Mobile acquired Sprint, forming, I believe it's the second largest uh, cell phone service in the United States. So we have AT&T, T-Mobile, um, Verizon, and a few other players. I will say that AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon have market power. They have market power. They are a small group of sellers to control market prices. The cell phone market in the United States is inefficient because there's not a whole lot of competition. Or the right? The same with airlines, and you know they also have market power. Airlines. Externalities. Decisions of buyers and sellers affect people who are not participating in the market at all. Yeah, that's true. Uh, if you're not on the market for buying a pair of shoes, you might be affected by changes in the sales prices for shoes. To either make you want to buy shoes or not. And this changes based off of the shoe industry of having inefficient equilibrium, which changes the standpoint of society as a whole. So to summarize, consumer surplus, buyers' willingness to pay, minus the amount that they pay. Producer surplus, amount sellers receive, sale price, minus the cost. Sales price minus the cost. Resources are allocated to satisfy the market based off of supply and demand. Okay, any comments, questions, or concerns? No, good. Sure. Okay, I want to say a couple of things. We're in week 5. I know it's shocking that we're in week 5 already. Here's the thing. Some of you fell behind a little bit. I know that you're busy. I know that you have life that gets in the way. I know that you have a job. I know that you have a family. I know. I get it. Okay, been there, done that. If you fell behind, let's say you actually missed a quiz or homework assignment or whatever. It's not too late. All right. I want you to do the work that you missed. I do. I want you to pass this class. The only way you can possibly pass this course is by doing all the work. It's that easy, I promise. You do all the work, you'll pass. If you don't, you won't. Very simple. Okay. So if you missed something, a discussion board maybe, mm-hmm. You missed the discussion board, you missed the quiz, you missed a homework assignment. And I want you to do it. Okay. If you don't do it, you probably won't pass this course. It's really that easy. You do the work, you'll probably pass. If you don't do the work, you're not going to pass. It's that easy. Okay, so do the work. Do the work. If you're late on your stuff, I'm not upset with you. Okay? I want you to do the work. I want you to pass. Y'all understand that concept? Do the work. Okay. As long as you get it. As long as you all get it. Okay? I want you to pass. And the way to pass is to do the work. If you miss something, get it done. Get it done. Okay? I don't want you to fail this course because you're not doing the work. If you don't do the work, you don't pass. Very simple. Okay? So do the work. Remember, like everything counts for like 5%, right? That adds up. Okay. So don't mess around. Just do it. Sorry about that, y'all. I'll get off my soapbox. I get all wound up sometimes when I don't see people doing the work. Uh, so please, if you fell behind for whatever reason, I want you to do the work. And I want you to do it now. Okay, we got to get you back on track. Because let me tell you, that midterm exam's coming up pretty quickly. And I'm not going to accept anything late past that midterm. I promise you. So, comments, questions, or concerns? Okay. Chapter 7 quiz due Sunday. It's the same as usual. Most multiple choice, true, false. You got 2 attempts on every homework assignment, every quiz. If you're not satisfied with a grade on a homework assignment or a quiz, remember you got 2 attempts at it. So try again. Okay. With that, if you have anything else, you need any help, you can email me, call me, set up office hours. I'm here for you. I am, okay. I don't want you to think I'm not here for you, because I really am. With that, please stay safe. Wash your hands. Do the right things. I'll see you all again on Monday, 5:30, for the next lesson. Thank you all so much for your time today. Appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful evening.